For thousands of years, one question has puzzled historians across the Middle East. Where did Persians really come from? Most people think they emerged with their great empires, shaped by powerful kings and ancient religions, but modern DNA science has just revealed something that changes everything we thought we knew. The truth is far older than any empire, older than any temple, and it's hidden in the blood of millions alive today. Scientists discovered that up to 90% of Iranian genetic ancestry traces back more than 10,000 years to the same land. This means something shocking about invasions, language shifts, and religious transformations throughout history. When Iran's languages and religions changed completely, did the people themselves change too? Or did the same ancient blood survive every conquest? When people imagine Persia, they picture mighty kings, fire temples, and massive empires carved into stone. But genetic research just shattered how we understand this history. Most historians assumed that invasions meant new people, that conquering armies replaced entire populations. Scientists studying modern Iranian DNA found something nobody expected. Between 70 and 90% of genetic ancestry in Iranians today comes directly from people who lived on the Iranian plateau over 10,000 years ago. The majority of Iranians are descended from the region's very first farmers. Their DNA is older than the Persian Empire, older than Zoroastrianism, and thousands of years older than Islam. While empires rose and collapsed, while religions came and went, the people themselves remained almost unchanged. But how did they survive when so many other ancient populations disappeared completely? To understand this survival, we need to go back 10,000 years to the rugged Zagros Mountains in western Iran. Humans there began doing something revolutionary. They started planting barley, domesticated goats, and built permanent homes from mud brick. This was the birth of farming in the region. For decades, historians believed all early farming came from one source in Anatolia that spread outward. But DNA evidence proved this story completely wrong. When scientists analyzed genetic material from ancient Zagros farmers, they discovered something remarkable. These people were not related to early European farmers at all. Their genetic line had split from European populations tens of thousands of years earlier, long before farming even existed. The Zagros farmers developed agriculture completely independently. They built their own civilization in the Iranian mountains, separate from the one that shaped Europe. And their genetic legacy never vanished. But then came the Bronze Age, and everything should have changed. Thousands of years later, nomadic horse-riding groups from the vast grasslands north of the Black Sea began expanding rapidly across continents. These steppe populations transformed Europe completely. In many regions, they replaced most local populations, and DNA from earlier European farmers was almost entirely overwritten. If invasions truly erase people, Iran should have suffered the same fate. But something different happened. When scientists examined Bronze Age remains from Iran, they found the ancient Zagros genetic signature still dominant. There was some mixing, particularly with people from the Caucasus, but nothing like the massive replacements seen in Europe. The steppe wave that reshaped half a continent barely touched Persia. Instead, DNA showed unexpected connections to South Asia, especially the Indus Valley. These links came through trade and long-distance exchange rather than conquest. Once again, Persia absorbed outside influences without losing its core population. But the steppe nomads themselves held a stunning secret about their own origins. The famous steppe nomads who reshaped Europe were not genetically pure outsiders. Studies now prove that a significant part of their ancestry came from Iranian plateau farmers who had moved north thousands of years earlier. Some of the blood that created the steppe cultures originally came from Iran itself. Centuries later, descendants of these steppe groups moved south again as Indo-Iranian peoples, horse-riding tribes bringing new languages and myths. When they crossed the mountains and entered the Iranian plateau, they were not complete strangers. They carried within their DNA echoes of the land they were unknowingly returning to. Conquerors returning to the homeland of their distant ancestors, bloodlines separating for thousands of years, then meeting again. The arrival of Indo-Iranian groups brought major transformation. Language changed completely. Older local tongues gradually disappeared, replaced by early Iranian languages that evolved into Persian. Scholars assumed this linguistic shift required massive migration. New language must mean new people, right? But genetics revealed something completely different. DNA evidence shows that while Iran's language changed completely, the population did not. The vast majority remained descendants of ancient Zagros farmers. The new language spread through influence, power, and prestige, not mass replacement. Small ruling elites likely married local women. Children grew up bilingual. Over generations, the language of power became the language of the land, even though bloodlines stayed mostly the same. Persian identity was not built by wiping people out. It was built by absorbing new ideas into an ancient population. This pattern continued as Persia entered its imperial age. Great dynasties rose, armies marched across continents, and religions were supported or suppressed. Yet, genetic studies of people buried during these imperial periods show remarkable continuity. Their DNA closely matches earlier Bronze Age populations, with no sign of large-scale replacement. Even when Islam arrived and transformed Persia's religious and cultural life completely, the genetic impact was surprisingly small. People adopted a new faith but did not become new people. But exactly how small was this Islamic genetic impact? By the 7th century, armies from the Arabian Peninsula moved with astonishing speed. Cities fell, and a new faith spread across vast territories. When Islam reached Persia, it brought a new religion, a new language of power, new laws, and a new place in the wider world. For generations, historians assumed such dramatic transformation must have reshaped the population itself. If the faith came from Arabia, then Arabian blood must have followed. The logic seemed obvious. But when genetic evidence finally emerged, that assumption quietly collapsed. Modern DNA studies show that less than 7% of genetic ancestry in Iran today traces back to the Arabian Peninsula. Only 7%, not a wave, not a replacement, just a small ripple on a far older foundation. Even more surprising, communities in Iran who identify as Arab today are genetically closer to other Iranians than to Arabian populations. Their ancestors adopted a new language and identity over time, but their deeper ancestry remained local. Islam transformed Persia's culture and worldview, but it did not erase the people. Within this long history, one community preserved something extraordinary. The Zoroastrians followed a faith that predates Islam by many centuries. Once dominant across Persia, they became a minority after Islamic conquests. Over time, many converted, others fled, and a smaller number stayed, preserving traditions quietly through generations. What nobody expected was what their DNA would reveal. When scientists studied Zoroastrian genetic makeup, they found something extraordinary. These populations carry some of the strongest genetic links to ancient Neolithic farmers of the Zagros Mountains ever recorded. This was not an accident. For centuries, Zoroastrians practiced endogamy, marrying only within their community. What began as religious choice ended up preserving one of the clearest genetic windows into Persia's deepest past. In their DNA, the ancient Zagros lineage survived almost untouched, protected not by empires or borders, but by tradition. Some Zoroastrians fled eastward across the sea and settled in India, becoming known as the Parsis. DNA studies of Parsis show remarkable continuity with ancient Iranian populations. In some cases, their genetic profiles align even more closely with early Persian ancestry than many modern Iranians, simply because of long-standing marriage patterns. But Iran's genetic story reveals even more surprises about modern diversity. Today, Iran appears diverse on the surface. Many languages are spoken, and many identities coexist. Persians, Kurds, Azeris, Arabs, Baloch, and others share the land. For a long time, this diversity was assumed to reflect deep genetic divisions. Different languages must mean different origins, different cultures must mean different people. Once again, genetics told a more complex story. When researchers mapped DNA across Iran, they discovered a strong central genetic cluster. Persians, Kurds, Mazandarani, Lur, and even many Azeris all shared this deep ancestral core. One case stood out clearly. Azeris speak a Turkic language introduced during medieval periods by ruling elites. Yet, genetically, most Azeris are far closer to ancient Iranian populations than to Turkic groups from Central Asia. Their language changed, but their blood did not. Ancient Iranian DNA appears far beyond the plateau itself. In South Asia, genetic traces link early Iranian farmers to populations connected with the Indus Valley civilization through migration and exchange long before recorded history. Along the eastern coast of Africa, genetic studies reveal Persian ancestry mixed into Swahili populations through trade, not conquest. Persian sailors and merchants crossed the Indian Ocean, leaving descendants behind. But the reach goes even further than anyone imagined. Even in parts of southern Europe, subtle genetic echoes remain. Modern populations in regions like Tuscany show small but measurable connections to ancient Near Eastern and Iranian-related ancestry. These are not signs of mass migration, but of long, slow movement over thousands of years. Persia was conquered many times. It adopted new languages, new faiths, and new rulers. But its people were not erased. They adapted, they absorbed, they continued. The Iranian genome is not a straight line from one origin to another. It is a web, a bridge linking early farmers to steppe nomads, South Asian civilizations, African coasts, and European shores. From the first farmers of the Zagros Mountains to mighty empires, religious transformations, and centuries of cultural change, every chapter left its mark on the Persian genetic story. What makes Persia unique is not just what changed, but what endured. Beneath empires, faiths, and languages, an ancient lineage survived, carried quietly through, thousands of years into the lives of people walking Iran today. As science continues uncovering these hidden layers, one question remains open. If so much of our past survives unnoticed within us, how many other stories are waiting to be rediscovered, not in books or monuments, but in the quiet code we carry from birth